If you love dark fantasy, you may be in for a treat with the upcoming Netflix show The Sandman, a live-action adaptation of the DC comic book series of the same name written by Neil Gaiman. The first issue debuted in 1988 and was originally conceived as a revival of an earlier Sandman series from the 1970s created by the legendary Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. Several characters throughout DC history have shared the name Sandman, each with their own creators, and there have been a number of spin-offs from Gaiman's version, most of which weren't written by him. His series follows the titular Sandman, known primarily as Dream or Morpheus, though he goes by different names with other characters. He's one of 7 cosmic beings called the Endless, the immortal personifications of what you could call core facets of the human experience, the others being destiny, desire, delirium, despair, destruction, and death. The story begins with a cult performing a ritual to summon and imprison death, only they capture Dream instead. The rest follows Dream's journey to escape, rebuild his kingdom called the Dreaming, and confront his past, and it spans an array of time periods, including modern day, and a number of realms steeped in rich mythology and folklore. Now, as far as I know, the comics began as horror in tone, but it evolved more into dark fantasy over time, though it doesn't cease to be any less horrific in some of its themes and depictions. The important thing I'd like to stress is that it isn't family friendly. I'm not sure how far the Netflix show will go, but it is rated TVMA, so I assume that they're going to stay true to the maturity of the content. As for which storylines the live-action series will cover, Gaiman's Sandman comics were eventually published in a collection of trade paperbacks, and the first season will adapt Volume 1, Preludes and Nocturnes, which includes issues 1 through 8 of the comics. They also began shooting episodes adapting Volume 2, The Doll's House, which includes issues 9 through 16, though it isn't clear to me if those episodes are also a part of the first season or if they're getting a jump start on a second. If you're a fan of the comics, you may be concerned that Netflix won't respect the source material, so you'll be happy to hear that the production is led by Neil Gaiman himself. And he's joined by other writers for the entire season like David S. Goyer, best known for Blade, Man of Steel, Dark City, and the Dark Knight trilogy, and more recently the series adaptation of Isaac Asimov's sci-fi classic Foundation on Apple TV, along with Alan Heinberg, who penned the screenplay for 2017's Wonder Woman and worked as writer and producer on a number of shows like Grey's Anatomy, Sex and the City, and The O.C. Meanwhile, the cast is pretty solid as well, including Captain Brienne of Phasma Tarth, Gwendolyn Christie, fellow Game of Thrones star Charles Dance aka Tywin Lannister, funny man Stephen Fry, clever girl Jenna Coleman, the not British Patton Oswalt, and Tom Sturridge as Dream himself. There will be some changes to further modernize the material, like setting the opening time jump in the 2020s instead of the late 80s. And based on the look of the characters in the comics, I anticipate some fan complaints about liberties being taken with the casting. Expect to see the word woke at least once. And if you're curious how big of a Sandman sandwich you're going to get on your plate, the first season will be 11 hour-long episodes, which is plenty of time to let the story breathe if they pace it right. Shooting wrapped last year, and the release date is still to be determined, though it is slated to drop on the platform sometime this year. I'm looking forward to the show because I'm a sucker for sci-fi and fantasy, but full disclosure, I never read the Sandman comics. I'd never even heard of the series until I listened to the Audible original. Now, just so we're clear, despite the fact that Audible seems to sponsor every review channel I've ever come across, my channel is brand new, so I'm not sponsored by anyone. And Audible is technically a streaming service, so it's fair game for Stream Come True. To that end, I'll occasionally share my thoughts on some of the best and worst audiobooks I've listened to, and what better time to start than now? Back when I joined Audible, I wasn't familiar with how to navigate the platform yet, so I went with whatever it suggested, and the one thing it kept pushing was an Audible original called The Sandman. Checking the details, it ticked all of my boxes. A dark fantasy with an intriguing story, a voice cast with some of my favorite actors, and a hefty runtime to get me through a full shift at work. Because a job where you can listen to anything other than the syncopated crushing of your spirit with the passing of each hour is a luxury I had no intention of taking for granted. It was also free. Stepping back a moment, as you may have guessed, Audible Originals are audio experiences produced by Audible for Audible. And I say audio experiences because while some audiobooks are produced in the traditional format of a narrator reading the material to you, Audible Originals are often produced more like radio dramas, akin to watching a film with your eyes closed. They're meant to be fully immersive, and they typically have wonderful sound design with performances that rival anything you'd see on screen. You're just hearing it instead. Like anything, the format has its pros and cons, but I'll save that for another video. My point is that The Sandman was the first audiobook I listened to, and fair play, it sold me on the platform. The story was so engaging, I quickly became invested in the world and the character of Dream himself. In fact, there were only 2 low points for me in the entire thing. One was any scene with characters eating, especially the tavern scene. I don't need to hear every sniffy, whiffy, sip and bite and chew and smack and gurgle and burp for 10 minutes straight. Though to be fair, The Sandman isn't the only audio experience where that was an issue. My other gripe was the introduction of death. No offense to Kat Dennings, she's very talented, but I hated her voice in the role and I wasn't a fan of her delivery. Nearly every scene she was in took some effort to get through, but the story itself made getting through it worth it. When I finished the book, I immediately searched Audible to see if there was a follow-up, which there was, but it cost nearly $30 because it's not included in my tier. So, book 1 is where my quest came to an end, but I'd be remiss if I didn't recommend at least that. Anyway, that first installment of the Audible original goes a bit farther than the first season of the Netflix show. It adapts volumes 1, 2, and 3, which includes issues 17 through 20 of the comics. Book 2, the one I didn't listen to, adapts Volume 4, Season of Mists, which is issues 21 through 28, Volume 5, A Game of You, which is issues 32 through 37, and some of Volume 6, Fables and Reflections. As mentioned, the Book 1 cast is fantastic, including the likes of Andy Serkis, Michael Sheen, Samantha Morton, Taron Egerton, my boyfriend who doesn't know it yet, James McAvoy as the Sandman, others I've never heard of before but who all did a lovely job, and Neil Gaiman himself as the narrator. It's about 11 hours long, but it won't feel like it, while Book 2 was a tad longer at nearly 14. And like I said, Book 1 was included with my membership, which is the lowest tier. I mentioned all of that because when I saw the title for something called The Sandman pop up on Netflix, I didn't just set a reminder. I set a pack of wild dogs loose on the reminder because I love the story that much and don't want to miss the premiere of the show. Will it be any good? Well, that remains to be seen, but I'll be there day 1 to find out. So let me know if you read the Sandman comics or listened to the audiobook, and tell me without spoilers if you have a favorite character or storyline and why. As always, my goal here at Stream Come True is to share my passion for storytelling and encourage you to dive into all of the amazing and not so amazing content streaming near you. So if you want to watch or listen to anything I covered here, the links are in the box. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the dreaming.